Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We know it's an extremely busy time of year, but wanted to take this opportunity to not only tell you what we've been doing in DC over the last couple of weeks and months, but also to give you an opportunity to hear from Amy Gleason, who has been instrumental in kind of driving interoperability forward on the CMS side. So we want this to be collaborative. So I'll be having a fireside chat with Amy, and I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself here shortly. But really, if you have questions, please just go ahead and throw them in the chat. We'll also stop periodically so that this can be interactive. So we're gonna have a conversation with Amy, see what she's up to, and talk about how you can get involved in the initiatives that she's driving. Then I'm going to hand it over to Ada, who's going to be focusing and giving you some insights into what we've been doing in DC. And then finally, we're going to open it up to you to see if you have any questions. And hopefully, we know the answers. And if we don't, we can certainly work to get them. Okay, so I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. My name's Amy Boggy Smith, General Counsel, Chief Privacy Officer, and VP of Regulatory Affairs at Zeus. Amy Gleason, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Amy Gleason. I'm the administrator of the U.S. Doge Service, and I'm a strategic advisor to HHS and CMS.
Hi,
Ada.
everyone. My name's Ada Glover. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Zeus and also part of the founding team, and have been spending a lot of my time really working with both Amy's here, trying to keep up with the shifting tides of interoperability, and really excited to share that experience with you all today.
Great. Okay. So to start out, Amy has a really personal story that I'd love her to share with you all today. That really drives, I think, a lot of the intention in what she's doing. So, Amy, if you could just kind of tell us your story, your daughter's story, and then that can, I think, set the foundation for helping understand what you're trying to achieve.
Sure. So, first of all, I started out in nursing in the emergency room a long time ago, and that was really the first time I saw where not having the data at the point of care, especially when people are in crisis, is really impacts their care. And that kind of led me into healthcare technology, where I worked on electronic medical records and all kinds of different health tech. And then in 2010, my then 11-year-old daughter, who was a competitive gymnast and cheerleader and flipped and twisted all over the place, had the energy so much we called her the Energizer Bunny back then, started having this set of rare symptoms that didn't seem connected at the time. So it started off, she had these bumps on her elbows and on her knees. And she was a gymnast, so we just thought that was probably from hitting the mats. And the doctors gave her steroid creams over and over and went to the dermatologist. She started having strep throat several times and had her tonsils out, but also not that uncommon for somebody that age. And then she started breaking bones. And some of that was through gymnastics, which again, not super common, but it started to be a little weirder where she was just walking one day and barely twisted her foot and broke her foot. She broke part of her elbow, just barely touching it on a cabinet. And that we kept asking the orthopedics, what's wrong with her bones? Is there something going on? And they kept saying her bones looked good. And then it got to where she started having headaches and stomach aches. And then she didn't want to go to school, which was abnormal for her. And then I started picking her up at gymnastics and she was taking a nap on the side of the floor. They said she just didn't have the energy today. She was too tired. And none of this really made any sense to us. And we were, obviously going to the doctor all the time. And eventually she had a biopsy at the dermatologist because they were going to do a light laser treatment, which needed a prior authorization for it. And so they demanded a biopsy first. It's the only time ever prior auth has helped us in our lifetime, but it got her this biopsy. And by this time, she was unable to stand up off the floor, walk up the stairs. I mean, she was a very sick child at this point. And this happenstance biopsy figured out that she has a rare autoimmune vascular disease called juvenile dermatomyositis, which affects all the muscles in the body. And that's why she was having so many issues of weakness and her bone. It wasn't her bones, it was the muscles around them that were causing challenges. And so it took 457 days for her to get diagnosed, which is a little over a year and 3 months. She had seen so many doctors, but I really think the challenge was that the data was siloed in all of these different EMRs. and each doctor only saw their part of the picture. And nobody really saw enough to say, why is this 11-year-old girl who's so athletic and has been healthy going to the doctor so much and having all of these problems? And I think somebody would have put it together if they had had all that information in one place. And so this has driven me to try to fix this issue for many years. I co-founded a company trying to help patients get their data and trying to help people have ways to navigate the healthcare system. I've obviously worked in healthcare technology for a long time. I did a stint back in the government in 2018 to 2021, trying to fix healthcare interoperability and launch the Data at the Point of Care project, which you might know helps get providers' claims data. But now Morgan sees 12 different doctors across 6 health systems in 4 states. She takes 21 pills every day. She gets an infusion every 3 weeks for a 2-day period. She's actually getting it today. They've stuck her 5 times today, so I'm getting live updates through her daily life. But this has led to her having her data scattered across 47 different patient portals, which is just virtually impossible for a human to keep up with where they are, usernames, passwords. Doctors change portals because they change their EMR, they get acquired and their name changes. So it's just really impossible to keep up with. Yet most of the interoperability to help patients get their data today is focused on logging in with a patient portal. And so that's really led me back to the government a second time, both at Doge, where we're doing modernizing technology across 9 different agencies right now. But I focus a lot of my time at CMS and HHS on this main problem.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story. So I think before we dive into the CMS healthcare ecosystem, I'd like to take a step back and just review with everyone the Make America Healthy Again, the CMS mission. So Lorraine, could you put that up on the screen? Okay, so Amy, walk us through what we're seeing here. How would you describe this mission and how you kind of fit in here?
Yeah, I like to just kind of touch on this because Dr. Oz is an amazing administrator and came into CMS earlier this year and has really driven us to have focus on some strategic objectives. And so empowering beneficiaries is kind of the one that most of the tech falls into, and interoperability and empowering patients to have access to things, as well as providers, but really putting a big focus on patients and beneficiaries. But we also really want to be a leading payer. We want to crush fraud. We want to figure out how to incentivize providers better and align spending to value. And so these are really the things that CMS is focused on across all of its pillars. But you can see empowering beneficiaries is right in the middle and is a very key priority of the administrator.
Oh,
Lorraine.
Lorraine, you're not sharing anymore. All right. Okay. Thanks. So, all right. If everyone, I think everyone on this call is aware of a very large announcement that happened back in July, announcing the CMS healthcare health tech ecosystem. And so, Lorraine, if we can go to the next slide, I'm big on visuals, which I think can help understand. Um, ki- Kind of just how broad and how many things that we're trying to accomplish and improve here. So Amy, talk to us about, you have you have private pledges from the private market that we're all, Zeus included, pledging to, really improve the health tech ecosystem. So how would you explain this to anyone who isn't as familiar or isn't familiar with the pledge?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a little bit of a step back before diving into the diagram. So when I came in to the government this time, Dr. Oz is very focused, as I said, on helping beneficiaries have better access to technology tools. There aren't enough providers for one thing, and in every other part of our life, we have so much technology that drives our lives. But in healthcare, we're still using fax machines and printers, and it doesn't really get the same kind of engagement from the beneficiary. And so as I said, I've been trying to fix interoperability for a while, and he was very excited about that. So in May, we did an RFI because we had our hypotheses on why interoperability, despite over 20 years of regulation, has not accomplished our goals. And even after all of that work, it's just too hard for patients and providers to have the information they need. So we wanted to know what everyone else thought. And so we did an RFI and really just tried to understand what the issues are that people saw from their lens. So we wanted patients and providers and payers and technology and EMRs and everyone to come to the table and give us their ideas. And we did an event in June with sticky notes and trying to get people to really dive into these issues. And so we really heard a lot from those sessions, which led to this whole health tech ecosystem. And the main idea really here was to not do another CMS rule or work with ASTP ONC to do another part of their rulemaking process, but instead was how can we make this process move faster? As an example, that data at the point of care project that I launched in 2019 was written into a rule in 2020. And when I came back this time in 2025, it still is not actually had its go live date. It's not required until January 1, 2027. So that particular rule took 7 years to actually get to implementation. So we wanted to make sure that we could do something that was much faster. So on July 30th, we launched this CMS health tech ecosystem. The main difference is it is not regulatory. So we basically wrote out a vision of what we wanted to see, which was really centered a lot around the patient and saying they should be able to get all of their data without having to know all those portal logins or have to remember all the providers they've seen or their names of their practices, and use modern identity to build some of the trust into the framework, because that seems to be the biggest issue we heard, is that trust is why a lot of this data doesn't flow. And so it's a voluntary effort. And we originally started off thinking we might get like 10 to 15 companies to come pledge with us. And we ended up having over 60 companies at the White House, including Zeus and many others like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Samsung, Anthropic, OpenAI, Epic, Oracle, Meditech, Athena, eClinicalWorks, lots of EMRs, and a whole bunch of consumer apps that are out there. And so we were really excited to have so much interest. And the whole idea is we threw out this vision and said, come join us. And we want to see results live in production by the end of March 2026. So just a little over 6 months from when we launched it out. And then we put a second set of goals in July 2026. And we'll probably add more and kind of keep growing. But the whole idea is really to kind of make it an accelerator and more like technology works and do iterative development and kind of figure out as a community what we think might work, publish it out, have everybody go for it. And then what doesn't work, we don't need to wait for another rule or something else to come. We can just make modifications and keep testing until we find the right answer. So that's the kind of big picture. So if you look at this diagram, we'll start on the right side of the diagram. So as I said, interoperability, we think is the main challenge that keeps innovation from happening in healthcare, because it's so challenging and so expensive and so many issues with it that it's really hard to innovate. You really need data to be able to do a lot of these things. So we came up with this concept called a CMS aligned network, which is really networks that will meet our CMS interoperability framework, which is really that vision I was talking about. So we wanted to expand the definition of a network. So we didn't want it to just be QHINs or just HIEs. We wanted it to be networks that maybe already exist or want to form around an existing business model. So we think a lot of the challenges we heard are that these data networks form solely for the purpose of exchanging data, and then they have to kind of figure out their value to justify the pricing. Instead, we thought there are a lot of businesses that already provide value, and then they could be a network on top of that. So there are data sharing networks, including Zeus, and then there are HIEs as part of this. We have health plans that are part of this, including Medicare. So we have committed that we will respond as a network by the end of March 2026. And then there will be EHRs, sometimes, or networks or providers could decide they want to get together. So as an example, for my daughter's disease, there's a network of about 6 to 8 providers that work together regularly. They could decide they want to become a network because they already share data and already have trust among themselves. And then the other big thing that we heard is that while we need to make changes to the networks and how they work, that there need to be some core functions that CMS really helps drive. The first one is provider directory. So we've seen in our research there are over 5,000 provider directories. I think there's probably even more than that. And estimates from CAQH and other studies have said that it's billions of dollars, like upwards of $6 billion a year, wasted on administrative costs just to everybody to figure out where Dr. Smith practices and how to connect with them and what insurance they take and that kind of information. So, because CMS is where you register for a national provider identifier and where most providers register for Medicare, we took that on as a provider directory to build. But we know we can't do it with just CMS data. We need the private sector to help support that. So, we're planning this to be one central location where everyone can update. So, if somebody changes their address in their EMR, it could update the directory. If a health plan adds somebody or takes somebody away from their network, they could update the directory and etc. So we really want it to be a everyone puts in and everyone gets the benefit. And part of that is obviously interoperability, where the networks are, who's in each network, how to connect to them. And we want to put transparency around that so you can actually see this provider has gotten 1,000 queries this month from patients and they answered 999 of them, or they answered none of them, and put some transparency around how all this is working as well. The second part is identity. So we really believe modern identity is the core foundation that's going to help with trust here. So on Medicare.gov, we're adding ID.me, Clear, and Login.gov as modern IAL2 credentialed identity providers. And so that will allow a Medicare beneficiary to come in and validate their identity using a license and their biometrics. Then they'll also be able to use that to log into Medicare.gov. We think that's very important for Medicare to have that experience and security, but we also think that helps drive the ecosystem and makes those patients already have validation, which will drive identity cost down and prevalence of it in the industry. And then from providers on the provider directory to help with trust, we are going to have an API on the provider directory that an app can call and say, is this doctor in good standing? Do they have a valid license? That kind of information. And we can give back that data so that you can help know they're a good provider. And that way we can start relying on their license under HIPAA to decide if they say it's for treatment purpose, then it actually is for treatment purpose, and not have everybody kind of pondering the definition of treatment over and over again, which has been happening for a while. And then the main show is obviously these patient-facing apps. So we started with three main use cases: Kill the Clipboard, which allows that patient to use their identity, request all their data with one access click, basically, get their data in an app of their choosing, and then share it with a provider using a QR code or a smart health card link. And we know that's not the only way the data will go. Like, providers still need to be able to get it other ways, and patients probably want to share it ahead of their visit, maybe. But we think it's a very empowering method to help get patients to understand they have their data and they can share it wherever they want. Then once they have their data, the other two big use cases are conversational AI. So right now, patients we know are using it everywhere, including my daughter. I have some great stories of success for that. But it's because it can be personalized on top of that data. It's not just generic LLMs giving answers. And then diabetes, obesity is the other one that can be personalized based on the records to help treat and prevent diabetes and obesity. We are adding in some new tracks over the next few months that will be musculoskeletal, depression, and anxiety. Those are going to be the next ones that we add. And then I talked a little bit about Medicare.gov, that we're putting a lot of focus on that as a way to engage beneficiaries as well. And we will be doing a lot of awareness. So Dr. Oz turned 65 this year. So we're going to be doing a Dr. Oz Gets Medicare kind of campaign and having him help use his way to communicate people to help explain why this is helpful for patients and how they can get engaged.
Great. I'm going to stop. I have some questions for you, but I want to see if anyone from the audience has any questions they'd like to throw out there. Okay. Well, there's a lot of work going on. And so there's a lot to be done for the end of March 2026. So where have you been most pleased with the progress that's happening, that has happened between July and now?
So I think the biggest, greatest thing so far is just the excitement and the momentum and the engagement from a lot of people. So we started off with 60, I think 68 companies, and now we just topped 500 this week. I think we're at 503. So we are getting a lot of engagement. We're getting a little less engagement from providers than we would like. So throughout my whole career in this space, I've heard providers want to be part of the challenge and the problem and figure out the solution. But we're having a little bit of trouble getting a lot of providers to come and join in the meaty discussions. So we want you to be there to say, if we have this kind of data and that, then we can feel more comfortable sharing it. Or if we really had this data, we could actually kill the clipboard and stop having patients fill them out. So we have several providers involved, but we need more. And we want lots of viewpoints from large health systems, from single doctors, from different specialties, different EMRs. So I think the more providers we can get involved, the better. We also have a lot of patients, but we could always use more of those as well. But I think just the progress, we have, I think, 12 working groups that meet regularly. We set up a Slack, which you have no idea how hard that is to do in the government. But we have a Slack with our government teams and with the private sector, which is pretty unusual and exciting. And so I think just the momentum and progress that's happening has been really great.
Great. Lorraine, if you could bring up the visual of what it looks like for to actually get involved. Amy, do you want to speak a little bit to the website and for those that are interested in kind of driving this change, how they can, what are next steps?
Yes, we would love for all of you to join us. So this is the Health Tech Ecosystem webpage. It doesn't have a great address because government, but if you Google CMS Health Tech Ecosystem, you'll find a page. And on that page, you'll see in the box in white, it says Join CMS and Making Health Tech Great Again, or for the first time, as I like to joke. But there's a pledge form right there, and you can click that. And there are several categories that you can join as. So we have CMS aligned networks, which means you're going to take the queries in from patients, providers, and payers and respond to them using that CMS interoperability framework. And then we have EHRs that agree to help their providers meet that same criteria. Payers, the same thing. Payers can join as a category. We have patients, as I said, providers who will say they'll kill the clipboard and participate in these networks. And then we have the patient apps, the three use cases that we'll be adding to. And then we added a category called Friends of the Ecosystem. So we found a lot of people pledging in a category that didn't quite make sense. They couldn't actually do the whole category requirements by themselves, but they might be supporting a provider or supporting a patient in one part of the journey. A good example is Clear, IDMe, login.gov. They can't do the whole use case of any of them, but they support all of them. And so we have this Friends of the Ecosystem as an individual or as a company. So if you come and pledges that, that gets you access into our Slack channels and you can participate in the working groups. And then we just added a category last week for states. So Louisiana actually pledged first in the original 68 to be a whole state that's fostering this environment. And we also have a rural health transformation fund that's out right now, which is the $50 billion going to help rural health. And that goes through the states. And so we put that category up to help get more states involved as well. So we would love you to come and join any of the categories, and all of them get you access into the Slack and the working groups, and they meet virtually. So we also do a lot of in-person connect-a-thons, and companies host different events. But there's a lot that happens online and in the Slack. So that's a great way to get involved.
We put the website in the chat in case anyone's interested, which we hope that you are. Okay, one more question for you, Amy. So what does this look like in 6 months?
Yeah, so I think, well, hopefully in 3 months, we will have patients. So I like to talk about it from Morgan's perspective. So as I said, she has all these different portals and all these different providers she sees. So I want her to be able to pick an app that she wants that's in the ecosystem, to click, basically register her identity, verify she is who she says she is, click a button, be able to get all of her information from all of the networks into one place, let that app have its functions that made her interested in it in the first place. So competing for her eyes on the screen, and then let her be able to scan her QR code when she gets to the doctor. Maybe on the way out, she could scan to take it with her from that day. Maybe not quite there yet, but we'll soon be there, hopefully. And then be able to use conversational AI on top of that. So as an example of some of the things she's been doing already with conversational AI, she's probably one of the few people in the US that actually has all of her medical records from birth, because I started carrying around a mom binder when she was sick and like, no, she already had this test. And no, like this doctor said that. And so I've gathered everything I could find from birth for her. So she has the records to put into LLMs and use, unlike most people. But she had applied for a clinical trial and was rejected, denied, because she has ulcerative colitis overlap. And that was an exclusion criteria for the trial. And so she was frustrated one day and she went to ChatGPT and said, I'm tired of taking all these meds and doing all these things. I want a clinical trial. It's been 15 years. Find me a new one. And ChatGPT actually said, well, actually, I think you're eligible for that trial because I don't think you have ulcerative colitis. I think you have a very similar disease called microscopic lymphocytic colitis, which is not as fast progressing and is not an exclusion for the trial. And so it had read her biopsy results and things from 15 years ago. And I had kind of forgotten. I remembered when she said something that there was like this vague conversation about exactly what kind of colitis she had, but her treatment wouldn't have changed for the 15 years. It was going to be the same, but it now makes her eligible for this clinical trial. And then one other example, she recently was on a high dose steroid for a while, which she hadn't been on in a while. And she was feeling really badly one day. She called me and said, Mom, I think I have to go to the ER. All of my tricks haven't worked. I can't figure it out. I called Dr. Adams. He said I should go to the ER. She's like, but I really don't want to go. I'm like, well, you should probably go if you're having this much trouble. Like your doctor said you should go. And she instead, of course, because she's my child, went to ChatGPT and said, I don't want to go to the ER. This is what I'm having. And it said, didn't you just finish a high dose steroid dose? Did you taper the dose down? And she had just dropped straight from 80 milligrams and a gram of Solu-Medrol a week to zero. And so her body was just like in complete freak out. So she called her doctor back and said, oh, I didn't taper. They gave her a taper schedule and she didn't have to go to the ER and she started feeling better right away. And so I want everyone to be able to have those kind of experiences in a safe, controlled way that they know what's happening with their data and it has all the information and they don't have to go the painful process I went through to get all of her records.
I think that sounds like a good goal. I know you have to jump here shortly. If we can change gears, there is a new model, the Access model that recently came out that a lot of people are excited about. So Lorraine, yep, there you go. If you could just speak to that for a couple minutes, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation at CMS just came out with this model, I think 2 weeks ago now. And so the idea of this is one of the things we had foreshadowed at the July event is that while this is a voluntary effort and we're trying to get people to just come do this because they want a better experience for the providers and for the patients, we know that there need to be incentives for this. So the Rural Health Transformation Fund is one way to start funding some of this information. But the access model is a new way that also is going to help with this. So it is a 10-year voluntary model for original Medicare patients. And it basically focuses on these specific kind of chronic conditions. It's diabetes, hypertension, obesity, dyslipidemia, heart disease, prediabetes, and being overweight, and then musculoskeletal depression and anxiety, which you notice closely aligns with our tracks that we were doing for the patient apps. But it really is allowing tech-enabled care solutions to get paid for outcomes instead of just on individual services and fee for service. So, for example, if you have an app that helps patients through AI or engagement that helps them lose 10% of their weight, then you can get paid on that result instead of the activity that happened. Or you decrease their blood pressure to a normal range, you can get that, or their A1C down. And it really kind of has two parts to it. It's the tech-enabled care part, which can be a technology company with a medical director that's doing that there directly billing Medicare, or it can be a provider that's using technology there and billing Medicare for that outcome. But then it also has a piece to manage the care plans and to enroll patients that helps providers get payments of up to $100 a year just for managing that care plan and checking in 3 times a year.
Great. Well, I'm going to see if you have a couple minutes, Amy, to see if there's any questions before we say goodbye. Anyone, either on the health tech ecosystem or the access model, have anything you'd like to share or any questions? And if not, we'll keep going. Okay. Well, thank you, Amy, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you've been incredibly helpful and available with lots of events, getting people together, trying to move this forward, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for joining today.
Yes, happy to do so. And please come join us. We need your thoughts and efforts with us.
All right. See ya. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ada, and we're going to dig into some of the insights that we've gleaned over the past couple weeks and months. So Ada, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Um, So first and foremost, I think it's no secret based on everything Amy shared that she and her team have been extremely busy along with all the other folks across CMS. And we've had the privilege of really watching all of this unfold and evolve and also participate at a bunch of different levels. So in addition to really interesting announcements, thought-provoking blogs, there have been a number of events that have been really collaborative and have invited the industry to come in and share their perspectives and roll up our sleeves and help move these efforts forward. And can't say enough about the Slack community and how refreshing it is to be able to collaborate across public and private lines in that kind of modern way. These are some of the themes we'll be talking about. We're going to go a little deeper into what we're seeing and perceiving on the TEFCA front, on the CMS aligned networks and CMS ecosystem front, and the access model, and also share a little bit of what else Zeus is keeping an eye on. So if we jump into the next slide here, one of the big questions I think in TEFCA, and I wanted to open up here, is it happening slowly or quickly? Is it happening at all? Where is the momentum? And this is something that Zeus has been watching really carefully. And I think it's really important because we do have pre-existing national data exchange networks. And I think in many ways, TEFCA is helping evolve some of that progress and mature it as well. What we've seen is we've seen the number of organizations that are listed under TEFCA that are starting to exchange data grow continuously over the course of the past year. And we're really watching that carefully and are really inspired by it. We're also seeing that there are some key heavy hitters that are driving a lot of that growth. So 97% of those listings are primarily through Epic or Athena Health. And we're really grateful to those EMR organizations for taking a stand and playing a leadership role because that's what it takes. It takes some of those big players to move to bring the industry along. And I think the progress on the Epic front is really notable. They are really key participants in the care quality network. And we're seeing that when you compare their listings there versus what listings are available on TEFCA, we're getting close to that 3/4 threshold of volume of listings. Now, that doesn't necessarily reflect traffic, but there is clearly a signal of movement. I think it's also worth noting that Oracle is a really key player in the EMR space, and they became a designated QHIN just, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, and so are very early in that journey, but we do expect them to catch up. So in general, I think there's been a lot of momentum, and so we're definitely keeping a very close eye on TEFCA. Next slide. There are a bunch of on-the-ground realities, and I'll invite Amy to maybe come back on camera here and go back and forth here because I think as we're both engaged in starting to try to onboard our own customers onto TEFCA, and then are also participating in and watching closely some of the policy and governance conversations. So Amy, do you want to take a pass through these, and then I can jump in as well?
Yeah, sure. So I have the pleasure of sitting as chair of the participant caucus and also being a member of the governing council, which sits on top of the participant caucus and the QHIN caucus. So have a lot of visibility into some of the changes that are the ASTP and the RCE, the Recognized Coordinating Entity, which is the Sequoia project, are trying to push in and have been pushing in the last 6 months. I think we've been pretty vocal about our opinions as to how hard it is to onboard and vet customers' perspective organizations that want to be part of the TEFCA network. And so I think, you know, if we take a step back on the current administration, this is kind of the second point as well, the current administration has made it very well known that they feel very strongly about patient access. So we're seeing a lot of intention and intentional attention directed at IAS, the individual access service, as well as trying to make sure that tech-enabled care, tech-enabled providers, have the ability to onboard and participate in in a way that is the same as a traditional provider. So, in talking about one, really that's where we're seeing some of these challenges is that for tech-enabled care, if you're providing your care virtually, your path to onboarding is just harder. So we're really pushing to trying to streamline that. And I think the administration, ASTP, is really open to trying to kind of, provide a more level playing field. So we are hopeful that we will see some changes in 2026. Uh,
Yeah. And I'll jump in here as well. I think some of the connection between the CMS ecosystem and the access model, our hope is some of that will also feed into how do we make sure that those innovative care models that are clearly a priority for this administration also have a more level playing field within TEFCA. So.
We've also seen, as we move on to number three, we've also seen a real uptick by ASTP, specifically Steve Posnek, who has been with ASTP for many, many years, really getting out and providing a voice through his blogs. So I think one of his most recent blogs is about trust. And Amy mentioned it when she was talking about the health tech ecosystem, that trust is important, and it is a challenge right now on the existing interoperability networks. I think my takeaway from one of Steve's blogs is an acknowledgement that while everyone is trying to provide access so that patients can get great care, what we're experiencing is subjective interpretations of what is treatment, who is a healthcare provider, and as a result, we're seeing implementation of different rules by different implementers that's creating, I think, some unintended challenges for the network and for making sure that providers can get the information they need to provide the best care. So I think trust is something that the networks are continue to work on, and hopefully we see improvement again in 2026.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll sort of applaud Amy here. I think her role in some of these conversations and the thoughtfulness with which we've tried to serve our customers as they navigate the slightly fragile onboarding experience, or really ensure that we're helping folks clearly articulate what their use cases are and why they fit into the frameworks, I think is really critical. Our hope is over time, things will settle a little bit. Some of these other efforts will help build trust. But we are in a challenging transitionary moment. And we at Zeus have been spending a lot of time really talking about how do we help our customers and prospects navigate that and really come out ahead.
And yeah, Zeus has customers live on Tafka. This has been a slow transition. So if we think back to the administration change, we saw a slowdown of Tafka adoption, purely because there was no national coordinator. So Dr. Tom Keene was appointed as the Health IT National Coordinator in June of this year, which meant that there was a several month long period in which there was no one at the helm really driving policy. So we have seen an uptick as Ada has shown the numbers, and we fully expect to be part of that uptick in 2026. I don't know, Ada, if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think between the slow transition and some of the government shutdown earlier this fall, there's been a little bit of uncertainty here, but we are seeing enough movement and momentum that we do think we'll see significant transition within the year of 2026. And so we're gearing up for that. Our goal is to both guide our customers through the application and onboarding process, but also we're spending quite a bit of time inspecting and validating sort of the response patterns and the behaviors on this new network and framework to make sure that as folks transition, all of the data timeliness and coverage that you expect from Zeus is still maintained. Great. So Now let's move on to the CMS aligned networks and the ecosystem. I know Amy shared one sort of graphic of how it all is working, and I thought I would outline my own perspective based on being in these conversations and trying to explain this to folks over and over again. And I think the headline here, and I'll echo what Steve said in his blog that I think was dropped either today or yesterday around, you know, the role of TEFCA and this new ecosystem. I think the goal here is to throw a lot at the industry and challenge us to see how fast can you possibly go and make that voluntary and not necessarily slow down the whole process with rulemaking, et cetera. So if TEFCA is sort of this steady foundation, I think CMS aligned networks can work alongside that to really challenge us to accelerate our path forward. So what's cool is there are a lot of new things. And there are a lot of opportunities to imprint on these new things, and we'll talk about that shortly. So first and foremost, there are new use cases. I think Amy spent a bunch of time talking about the patient-facing applications. Um, I think on the provider side, things look reasonably similar from a use case perspective when we talk about full treatment, although you do have this interesting bridge between patient and provider-facing apps of Kill the Clipboard, where data can be transferred not just via the networks, but also direct to patient. I think this is really compelling vision and actually very similar to how Zeus has been thinking about the problem as we consider the common patient record architecture that we've invested in. And then payers are also being invited into the conversation and also being expected to respond when they're participating. And I think that CMS here has done a nice job walking that trust line by defining some limited use cases for payers to participate in initially, which are primarily focused on open quality gaps. So I need to close this quality gap related to a patient's A1C. Let me just query for that data point, as well as claims-based encounter access. So I'm currently reviewing a claim for this specific encounter. Let me get the documentation for it and skip all of the joys of manual chart chasing there. So definitely a new set of use cases and a new set of opinions about which use cases to invest in. Querying entities, obviously patients and payers are kind of new entrants here. Patients are also a participant on the TEFCA front. Payers, we've seen discussions, but haven't yet seen sort of the same kind of momentum on the TEFCA side. And then Amy also spoke to all of these new frameworks and technologies, two of which I think CMS is taking a really sort of proactive stance in, which is building that national provider directory, and then helping establish and lead by example on the side of digital identity. And then I think almost this bottom row is almost the most interesting and exciting one. We have been in the world of CCDA document-based exchange for many, many years. And I think CMS here has said, actually, let's move past that. They've acknowledged that it's going to take time because Amy spoke to the March deadline to get something in production. This is a July target milestone to adhere to some of these newer exchange paradigms. But I think they're really exciting. How quickly the industry will adopt to them, I think, is an open question. So first bucket here, we're moving from documents to FHIR. Folks have FHIR-based APIs. Why not use them to respond? Can others hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And I think his comment went away.
Okay, great. Two is they're asking for Exchange to include unstructured clinical documentation. We are in a generative AI moment in time. And so while structured data is extremely critical and powerful, there's a lot you can do with unstructured data. This third one I think is really exciting and important. One of the major themes that I think Zeus participated in that first June brainstorming session with the stickies that Amy referred to was really talking about how the ADT and notification sort of ecosystem is a real barrier to successful, proactive, value-based, sort of outcome-oriented care. And so they responded to that by saying, hey, if you are a provider in EHR, you need to also provide notification-based paradigms. And lastly, payers participating. This is where we hope to see CMS lead by example, go beyond the groundwork that has been laid with Blue Button and data at the point of care and help scale those. these are all challenges. I don't know. The big question is this challenge has been presented to the industry. How quickly will it all happen? We're definitely seeing tremendous activity and innovation and interaction. So I attended the Connect-a-thon that was a couple of months back, and the HHS building was just filled with people working on problems, brainstorming solutions. There are working groups for every box on this screen where folks are asking themselves questions from, hey, what demo can we do using existing technologies, to what is the future standard going to be to make FHIR API-based exchange possible, to what should this national provider directory that CMS is building include, to what is the policy framework and how do we make the policy framework as lightweight as possible. So this is very much a community-driven effort, which transitions us to the next slide here, which is how to get involved, right? So Amy talked about the pledge. The pledge opens up the opportunity to attend, listen, participate, converse, whether that's on Slack, whether that's in-person events or other forums. They're also sort of challenging folks to start building and partnering amongst one another to do individual demos, and then actually engage in hardening some of that in policy and design. I think on the Zeus front, we've pledged as a CMS aligned network, so one of those rows within the framework. As I've mentioned, we've been quite involved and have participated and attended plenty of these events, some of which are hosted by CMS and some are not. We had a team member attend an identity-oriented session that Clear hosted, which was exciting. On the test building and demo use cases, we're focusing a lot of our energy on some of the nuts and bolts and that question of FHIR-based exchange, as well as that question of how would a directory help facilitate some of that. We, in some ways, have invested in a FHIR native data store as our core, and so believe this is a great place for us to focus our energy initially and to focus on being that network exchange. We also do a bunch of other stuff, right? So we have a provider facing experience. I think it could be interesting longer term to imagine what it would look like for a patient with a kill the clipboard QR code to instantly load that data into the ZAP. But for the first half of 2026, we're really focused on that. And then lastly, we're quite engaged in these work groups, policy and technical design. Amy has the pen on a lot of the question of how do we create a lightweight policy framework so this all works without creating like a very burdensome application and oversight process. And so has been doing a lot of thinking there. And I've been very involved in that National Provider Directory working group with the challenge of how do we help CMS build an asset that is useful quickly, particularly for this use case of facilitating network exchange. And I think for all of you, I won't repeat what Amy said, but think both which category might apply to your organization. And there's definitely a push for more providers, and there's a provider group that is being led by Amy, help me out here, Kara Justice, I believe is her name, from the Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah.
Okay, I got. So consider participating there and maybe speaking to some of these trust use case type considerations. And then for some organizations, it might be appropriate to roll up your sleeves a little bit more.
And for Kara Justy, she has a provider work group that I think meets every other week. If you're not familiar with Kara and don't know how to reach out but are interested, feel free to email me and I can make a connection. She would be delighted to have you in her group.
Great. I think we've got 2 more slides. Did want to speak to access as well. I won't repeat a lot of what Amy already shared with you all, but I will call out a couple of things. One is applications are going to open in mid-January. We're eagerly awaiting that moment, and I'm guessing many of you might be as well. Second, I want to call out this sort of lower box here around eliminating barriers. One of the announcements that came on December 4th at the event in DC was around FDA Tempo helping accelerate some of the FDA processes for devices that are used as part of the access program. I think that's a signal that they're really focused on removing barriers and blockers. They've also shared that there's plans for an access tools directory and the fact that interoperability is really critical to being successful in access. Zeus fully plans to sort of go through the process to be part of that tools directory once there's a little bit more information there. And then Amy and I also nodded to the fact that given the role of interoperability and in success in this model, we hope that there is some consideration of that with some of the interoperability frameworks. I think to that end, I think there's a one of the things that CMMI voiced really early on, and as they were crafting this model, was wanting to make sure that they're both outcome driven, but also that they're not introducing a bunch of new players that are going to introduce more fragmentation to the market, and sort of assuring folks that there'll be continuity between the primary care provider and the new tech-enabled care delivery service. And so they've introduced this co-management fee for primary care providers. I've heard some skepticism in the industry around, is that enough to really engage PCPs to participate and drive referrals to these tech-enabled providers? I think that's going to be a question that we'll all wait and see, but also to set up interoperability requirements to make sure that there's bidirectional visibility into the impact of the plan of care. And that's definitely an area that Zeus is looking forward to supporting, in addition to, outcome-oriented incentives. Got to drive outcomes, need to see the whole picture of the patient in order to do that successful. And sometimes the measures for these outcomes may be measured by the tech-enabled vendor or may be measured in other settings, but still be critical in demonstrating the impact. All right. And then our last slide here is really around what else is going on, because we couldn't go deep on everything. So we'll just rattle through these at a very high level and then open it up for questions. So the ambulatory specialty model, and sorry, there's a typo, ASM, that was part of the new provider fee schedule and is a mandatory model focused on heart failure and low back pain. I think there's a lot of open questions around how this might drive more specialist participation in value, and whether that opens up sort of new interoperability needs. So we're keeping a close eye there. There is also an expectation out there that the next iteration of the Healthcare Technology Interoperability Rule, so HTI 5, and shortly followed by HTI 6, will drop, at least some of it before the end of this year and some next year. I think the assumption is that'll include some deregulatory efforts around EHR certification and FHIR APIs, but we're not quite sure. There are big questions around whether any impact on TEFCA or info blocking rules will be included in those rules as well. So we're watching out for those. And then Amy, do you want to run through the remainder here?
Sure. So I think I believe it was last week, Trump issued an executive order on AI. So wondering what this actually means for the state level regulations that are deemed overly restrictive. So wondering how that will work in practice, and definitely keeping our eye on that. That's kind of a general, less interoperability, but more generally applicable to lots of different areas. Bill Cassidy proposed a bill at the beginning of November called the Health Information Privacy Reform Act. Really, what this does is expand privacy protections of HIPAA to health-related data handled by non-HIPAA covered entities. So think consumer apps. So depending on what kind of traction this bill gets, we'll see how does this impact consumer apps, as well as a variety of other things that are included in the bill that we don't have time to touch on here today. And then finally, keeping an eye out on a potential exemption of care coordination and case management, and care management, not case management. Sorry, that is also a typo. From the minimum necessary standards. So that is something. There are rumblings that HHS is going to come out with that. Potentially sometime spring of next year. What could that look like for interoperability? As many of you know, the networks are limited to treatment, and TEFCA obviously has individual access services. But what could that mean for interoperability if some of these use cases are no longer bound by the minimum necessary requirement. So we will be keeping our eye on that as well.
I think we missed one around info blocking. There was a lot of activity and announcement around info blocking early this fall, and a big call for folks to report, especially providers. Um, the question is, are we going to see sort of a corresponding uptick in enforcement? What will that look like? So that one as well. Great. We've got a couple more minutes. So any questions from the audience? We are out of slides, so.
We answered all of the questions.
I think that's a job well done. Well, in that case, thank you all for joining us, especially during this very busy time of year. Hope you learned something. Hope you have a few new questions to bring back to your organizations. And if we can at all be helpful in all of you navigating this going forward, if you have any questions about how you might get involved, feel free to reach out to either one of us or whoever your friendliest SUSER is. And happy holidays.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.